So, welcome everybody to the Comics Pod, issue 250. For you who don't know who we are two Swedish comics fans. My name is Göran Semb, and you're
Chris Larsson.
And every 50 shows or so, we do one in English for our non-Swedish friends to ignore. And we're going to...
Our massive international audience, that's how you should put it.
Yeah, our massive ignoring us international audience. We're going to present two comics here. So it's going to be pretty brief, because if we're anything, we are brief. And I'm going to talk about the Swedish comics creator Österberg, and you're going to talk about...
I am going to talk about Gilbert Hernandez, and specifically the book called Blood of Palomar, or Human Diastrophism.
Human Diastrophism?
Yes.
You're going to have to teach me what that means.
I will tell you what that means.
Now, this is in Swedish, so you may think it's pretty useless for me to introduce it to an international audience, but there is an international edition of one of Österberg's books available, and I'm going to give you a link to that down in the presentation of this video. And I heartily recommend it. Her speciality used to be social realism, with ordinary humans and their ordinary people and their interactions and relations.
Often with a slightly autobiographical
touch or hint. Yeah, true. And she is a very good artist with a clean, easy to read, very clear style. Here's my dedication. But she, apart from drawing, she also has a deep and long interest in mythology, not least Greek mythology. So she went and combined her taste for realism in human interactions with her love for Greek mythology, and created something that is brilliant. The title of this book is Feud och Fest, which means feud and feast. Alliteration in English as well. And if there is one character who is more the main character than anybody else, it's Hades, the lord of the underworld, who is sort of goth in his youth and becomes more reclusive with age.
Yeah, and just to add there, he's a really strong recurring character, and that's why we call him a main character here.
Yeah, but well, in this collection he certainly is the strongest one. But there is a wide plethora of characters consisting mainly of various gods, which are interpreted in accordance with mythology, but with a specific Österberg interpretation of them. Anyway, I'm going to talk about... This is a collection of several stories about the Nekia story, which is about a philosopher who wants to know what is the best way to live, and who would know better than people who already had their lives, namely the dead. So he persuades, I think she's a cousin, who is a priestess, and can take him into the underworld. And in parallel, the messenger of the gods, Hermes, is down there with a message for Hades. And he meets a recently dead girl I think she's maybe 16 or 14 or something, and died in childbirth. And he's there to offer Hades the message that we're having a great feast with all the gods, and you're a member of the family, so you're invited. And Hades is not very fond of consorting with his family, partly because he doesn't like living people or gods. He prefers the dead, and also because his family is severely dysfunctional, which anybody who knows anything about Greek mythology already knows. Yeah. So he's not interested in going anywhere to meet his family. And this is his reaction to the idea of a family reunion. Meanwhile, the philosopher and his cousin the priestess have been discovered and caught, and Hades is not happy with living people coming down here. This is the realm of the dead, and they should be left alone by those nosy living people.
Right.
And then there's a bit of a talk about life and death, and basically that's it. But it's wonderful because Lee Österberg has a great flair for characters and dialogue, and it's very well drawn, and she puts in a lot of humor into it. And there's also this very cute and sweet subplot about this dead girl who hasn't quite understood yet that she's not alive anymore. And when Hades meets her, his demeanor changes completely, and he becomes welcoming and caring and soft-spoken, and he gradually lets her in on the idea of being dead and living there in the land of the dead. And he comforts her, and it's beautiful. And Hermes likes him. And he likes Hermes a little too, because he doesn't hit him or anything. But he has problems with closeness. And in the end, the dead girl finds herself at rest. And it's beautiful, it's funny, and it's not dumb. It has some clever advice for anybody. And I'm going to say a few words about the longer story here, the titular story, Feud and Feast, which is about that family feast that he's invited to, and where all the gods meet and act out their various personalities and their various troubled relations,
right,
or sexual relations.
Sure.
A little bit of both.
Sometimes at the same time.
Yeah. And the reason I want to talk about this one is because I'm going to be brief. I'm not going to take up much more of our time with this. But this is Hades at the party. He is not the life of the party. If you're middle-aged plus, you may remember Ingmar Bergman. And Ingmar Bergman did a few comedies, and they were very much about relations and stuff like that. And this, and full of, sexual relationships, awkward relationships, etc. And this is like an Ingmar Bergman comedy to a large extent, except for one thing. It's funny. It really is. Yeah. So it's both great characterization, a great take, a great angle on the mythology, a great story about relations and people, and funny. I warmly recommend anything that Lee Österberg has made. And the next story is about Hades' relation to one of the female gods that he meets and gets a connection to in this at this party. And that's the one I'm going to link that you can buy for the mere price of $18, which is super cheap. Unfortunately, I have to pay $12 for postage also. Right. But still, yeah, it's so worth it.
It's well worth it. And if there's any Swedish comics creator who deserves being translated into any other language and reaching a bigger market, it's certainly Lee Österberg.
Yes. Absolutely. And you deserve getting to read Lee Österberg, unless you're a bad person. If you're a bad person, skip that. But if you're a middling to decent person, you deserve to read Lee Österberg if you like comics. And especially if you know a little bit about the Greek mythology already, because it's a highly entertaining take on them.
Absolutely, and these books are books that you can recommend to people who are not particularly interested in comics either, because they are the stories are so effectively told that they're better than basically any romantic comedy you can see, for example, in the movies.
Yes.
So yeah,
and also it's better drawn than most intelligent comics.
Oh,
it's
absolutely,
very readable.
Definitely.
Anyway, Lee Österberg, warmly recommended from both of us.
Yep.
Over to you,
yes,
Christer.
Thank you. So when Göran said that we were going to do this episode in English and that he was going to talk about Lee Österberg, I decided to talk about one of my favorites, who is Gilbert Hernandez, and especially this book, Blood of Palomar. I say that different titles. This is no slightly older edition. I can't remember when this is from now. This one is from 1989, it says. It reprints a comic that was serialized over a number of years.
Yes.
And it reprints a slightly revised version of that comic too. So he had the chance to go back and solidify the storytelling a little bit, and he really did. So today, in more recent editions, this book is entitled Human Diastrophism, after the main story in this book. And diastrophism, then diastrophism is what you call the movement that tectonic plates make. So it's a massive Earth movement.
Okay.
Let's call it that.
Okay.
That sounds a little bit fecal when you say it in English, but that's all right.
Yeah,
we can do that. And human diastrophism then is, of course, a sort of trauma, an earth-shattering trauma.
A big shake-up.
Yes, and it is. So what happens in this book is that there comes a serial killer to the village of Palomar, which is the village in which Gilbert Hernandez set most of his stories at this time. So the characters who are at this point familiar to us, centered around, for example, Tonantzin on the cover, and the mother figure, the very complicated and interesting mother figure, Luba, and a number of other more or less important characters. Those are all familiar to us, so we get to see what happens to them at this point when actual evil comes to them, because there's a serial killer who kills for seemingly no reason. It seems to be random completely, and the tensions that occur in this village when this happens. At the same time, the village is invaded by a group of monkeys who wreak havoc everywhere. They steal food, they steal things, they almost steal a baby. So it's a really sort of chaotic period in the village's life. A smaller, sort of more individual drama is that which Tonantzin goes through, a very confused political awakening. Awakening is the word.
If you get it right in 3, nobody can complain.
I think so too. That's what I say to my students. And the tragic story of Tonantzin is what basically frames this story, and it's wonderfully shown on this page, where Tonantzin is in a tree looking at a train passing by, wondering about transportation of war materials. She's getting letters from somebody telling her about great political conspiracy theories, and it has a bad effect on her. So she's up the tree, of course. Her sister is yelling at her to come down, and somebody walks by and says, "We could always burn the tree down." And her sister says that's not funny. In the end, Tonantzin lights herself on fire in a political protest, and on the final page, ashes rain over Palomar. So that sort of personal tragedy frames this entire story. It's incredibly tragic and beautifully written. It's so well prepared throughout the story. Other interesting, let's call them sub-stories. Subplots that are going on here are the one about the suffering artist who is sneaking around the village making portraits of the villagers on the sly. He is doing this in response to an artistic crisis that he has, because the village teen bully has knocked him down and told him that his art is no good because you can't see what it's what it portrays, what it depicts, and he gives him an example of art that he has himself produced. Look at this. I can do this. You can't. So your art is ugly and angular and yeah. So he goes through a crisis because he does realize that you could indeed see what that drawing was, and his art has a different quality. So he goes through a very difficult time. Then most movingly, it's the story about Luba's children, because as I said, Luba is a maternal character, a sort of archetypal maternal character, and
a bit of the Earth Mother in her.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. In this book and in others. But in this book, she is going through a bit of a crisis because she is getting older, and she is starting to feel that. So she is cruel to her children, especially to her oldest daughter, who is hiding the fact that she's a lesbian from her mother. But to the other children as well, and she's cruel, emotionally cruel, and she beats them out of frustration
Mm.
with her own life, not with them.
Mm.
And the girl that, of course, takes this the hardest is Guadalupe, who is the good daughter, who does well in school, tries to behave, tries to keep the other daughters in line, tries to mediate in conflicts and so on.
Mm.
And there's this wonderful sequence here that really gets me every time, where Guadalupe is slumped down in a chair after a hard day at school, and her sister Casimira is playing with her doll.
Mm.
And she is disciplining the doll
Mm.
quite brutally, yelling her own name and her sister's, right? And as you see, she's very brutal with the doll. And Guadalupe so wakes up and sees what's going on here. This is not good, right?
Mm.
This is the responsible girl. So she stops Casimira and suggests, why don't you play nice with the doll? You know, if you hug the doll, it'll feel better.
Mm.
But it doesn't work.
Mm.
It's still bad girl Casimira. And that's such a great, and Guadalupe of course is just crushed that her psychology doesn't, which is accurate, doesn't work.
Because she doesn't understand the psychology of having to let things out.
Right, exactly. So that's just one, and maybe the best example of where this book combines the magical realism, which is the general tone of it, with a really sort of profound psychological realism as well. These sometimes sort of cartoony characters. Gilbert Hernandez has written a great many books. I think the Love and Rockets library is up to 15 or 16 volumes now, and between him and Jaime. This is the peak, I would argue. He did a bunch of really good books after this one too. But Human Diastrophism is probably the peak.
Do you know in which library book this story is?
Yes, it's in volume. I can't remember. It's because they have double numbers, right? They numbered after Hernandez, Gilbert, and Jaime, and then so it could be in volume 7. But the volume is called Human Diastrophism.
All right.
So
you not certain about the number, but about the title.
The title I'm absolutely certain of. It's Human Diastrophism.
All right.
If you buy that volume, you also get even more of these really sweet short stories that is included a few in this as well.
Sugar and Spikes looks like it's alluding to Sugar and Spike of DC 60s fame.
Could well be. These are full of references. We were talking earlier about, before we started recording, we talked about the opening page here, which juxtaposes a murder victim with a birth. And the murder victim there in the first 3 panels it's clearly a sort of echo of Ghost on the Imjin by Harvey.
Corpse on the Engine.
Corpse on the Engine.
Yeah.
Corpse on
the Engine by Harvey Kurtzman.
Kurtzman, yeah, exactly.
Who also peaked around then.
Yes, yeah. So he there's also in this book, if you look carefully, references to Marvel artists like Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby. Both of them. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. They are the storytelling is so powerful that you can read straight past them without noticing. But once you have, it's not something that you can just ignore. So great stuff. Also, lots of really beautiful allusions to art, to painted art, since that is one of the subjects here of one of the topics in the
with the
in the
artist.
book. Yeah, exactly. So there's this allusion to a famous Picasso drawing and a sort of Picasso pastiche, which was used as a cover for one of the issues in which they appeared. So really good. These exist in a number of different editions. I like the library edition. That's a good one. This one is nice because the size is it's easy to read, but I don't really like the glossy paper on this one.
Okay.
I prefer the
less glossy.
Let's call it less glossy. The sort of coarser paper that they used for the library editions.
Okay.
Gilbert
Right.
Hernandez, lot of polymer, great stuff.
There you have it. Lee Österberg and Gilbert Hernandez. And I'll put a link to Lee's English language book in the description. Recommend it warmly. Take care. And in 50 programs we'll do another English one. Probably.
Also.
Unless we change our minds.
Exactly.
Before. Right. See you. Bye.